the Saturday, taken away from your families. So I hope you're having a great day. I've been in Jordan for about 5, 6 years, and I've been here a lot. I started 2 companies here. I did a lot of things. And one time, probably a few years ago, I went actually walking around, grabbing people, and asking them a question, okay? When I asked the question, the people looked at me and they thought I was an idiot, okay? Yeah, it's obvious. Why are you asking such an obvious question, right? And, many of them wanted to, tie me up and throw me in somebody's car or something. Here's the question I asked. What's the value proposition? Okay? And most of the people got the whole systematic importance of value proposition wrong. They got it wrong. 85% of the people got it wrong. They talked about their company, making new profits, putting my products out in the market, doing all that stuff, instead of talking about the customer's company, because the customer's company is the most important company, right? The customer, they're paying your bills, right? So I haven't had before taken this much farther. Value proposition is really a fundamental issue, and we'll see later how deeply fundamental it really is to your careers too, as product managers, as any career for that matter. So value proposition is really important. My name's Michael. I have this company called Transformation Strategy Partners. Maybe we'll talk about that later. Okay, let's get going. So customers don't buy your products because of cool features. We're tempted to go in and talk to the customer and say, oh, I have this great feature. Or worse, we're tempted to go in and say, oh, the competition does this, but we're much better. This is the wrong way to approach the problem. You shouldn't be saying AI, right? But AI, the guy who's going to sign the checks for your company says, oh, nice, but what does that mean for my business? Which is the whole point of quantified value proposition. Business. You're connecting your stuff to what the customer needs to help their business. It helps your business too, because you're getting paid for this, right? But the most important thing is not cool features. In fact, unless you're willing to say how those features have an effect on the customer's business, I say be very gentle about talking about your features, okay? So, customers buy your solutions because your product that you're offering this customer brings value to them. And what we do in quantified value proposition, what we do is we quantify that value in cash terms. We'll see. We'll see a lot about this later. In cash terms, you don't just say, oh, I have AI. What you say is, I am improving and optimizing your workflow. That's going to reduce your labor cost, okay? So therefore, when you use my product, you reduce your cost, okay? And you can quantify that cost, but we'll talk about that. Anyway, right over there, I started a company, you may know about it, called Decapolis, okay? This was 5 years ago, something like that, 5.5 years ago. And Decapolis was one of the first companies to use blockchain for food safety traceability. So you want to trace the components that went into making food. Initial customers, I'll tell a story about the initial customer related to this topic. The initial customers were the first customer was a big dairy producer in Jordan, okay? And the idea was to scan all of the components. They make biological tests. The milk comes from somewhere. They pasteurize the milk. They add stuff to it at each of those steps to track that and store it on the blockchain. Okay? First meeting with the customer, the CEO owner of this company. Okay? Mazra. I can't pronounce it correctly. Fawaz Shaka, Mr. Fawaz. Yeah. I'm sorry? He and I created a company right over there. Okay? Created this company. Anyway, so first meeting at the company, we went in. Okay? We talked to Mr. Fawaz about what he needed and what he was doing. And oh, by the way, do you know what the purpose of the first meeting with the customer, the first ever meeting, what's the purpose of the first ever meeting with the customer? Huh? Knowing the needs, but no, there's a better, more result-oriented answer. Getting the second meeting. When you go in and talk to a customer, you should be discovering what the customer needs and talking and understanding the people, etc. But your goal is to make sure there's a commitment before you leave that meeting. There's a commitment to the second meeting. Okay? So we had this discussion with Mr. Fawaz, and he said, cool stuff, and we got a commitment for the second meeting, a few days later, or a week later, or something like that. And as we were leaving, my partner said, we got to want to close this business. I said, Habibi Abdurrahman, okay. Our job isn't to close the contract in the first meeting. It's to get the second meeting. We got the second meeting. We went back to the second meeting, and you'll see the sheet, the one-page QVP, Quantified Value Proposition sheet we produced, okay? We went to the second meeting. Mr. Fawaz is there. We go in. We put it up on the screen. He looks at it for a second. He picks the telephone up, and he calls the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer of the company. This guy comes in, tough guy. Those guys don't smile. They never smile, right? He comes in, and he looks at the numbers, and he says, how did you get that? How did you reduce cost in that way? So I went to the worksheet, which is connected to the spreadsheet, and I said, so I assume that you have these many people with this much kind of... He said, no, that's wrong. I said, okay, tell me what's right. So I typed in how many people, what the average salary of the people are, or when they were doing this sort of stuff, right? I said, is that right? He said, that's right, that's good. I'm thinking at this time, this is really great, okay? He's tough, he's a tough guy. I'm thinking, this is great. The customer is helping me to sell my product to them, okay, right? I'm shaping what value I'm bringing in financial terms. I'm shaping what value I'm bringing with the CFO sitting there, okay, being really difficult. No, I don't like that, or that was right. So at the end of the day, we had a better model, and we made a sale. Okay, ultimately, at the end of the day, the punchline to the joke is we actually made a sale. A couple of important things about that. One, a quantified value proposition is a conversation. You're having a conversation. It's not just a statement. Here's a fact. It's a conversation. You have a conversation with a customer about how your stuff, your product, fits in with their needs, right? So it's a conversation, and what's also important is that they feel a part of the process of actually exploring how your stuff helps our stuff, namely how your stuff helps me, the customer, okay, get better, have better profits, or whatever. Okay, so quantified value proposition is a statement of value using quantified assessment. We'll be talking a lot about that. A quantified assessment of what benefits you bring, what benefits your product brings. Okay, it's not abstract. It has something to do with your company as a company who's selling a product to a customer, but it really has more to do with the customer than anybody else in the picture. So, QVP, Quantified Value Proposition, I'm going to just say QVP from now on, okay? Sounds nicer. Is all about cash value, okay? It's the cash value you bring to the customer. Only two ways you can do that, two general ways. You reduce cost or you improve revenues. Your stuff either causes them to reduce their costs because you have more efficient, you're improving the workflows, you're doing whatever you're doing with your product, okay? So you're reducing their cost. And there are some cases where you're actually giving them the ability to generate new services, to generate new revenue. Okay, so revenue improvement. Now, I want to say something. I studied math. I studied abstract math, and we'd always make fun of the statisticians, the statistics guys. Why? The pure mathematicians would make fun of the statisticians. Why would we do that? because statistics guys and girls, they square everything because it eliminates negative numbers, right? When you square something, negative numbers are inconvenient, right? We don't like negative numbers. So, like for example, population variance, sigma squared, right? To get rid of the negative numbers. So that being said, you'll excuse me because in the model that I'm going to show you today, this is a positive number. It's not a negative number. Surely it's cost reduction, which means you're reducing the cost to them, but I express it as a benefit, as a positive number. Okay? It's useful, it's easy, everybody understands. Okay, so it's very important to understand who the target audience at the customer is, okay? If your solution works in some kind of technical area, whatever, say IT systems optimization, it's tempting to think that the audience listening to you when you talk about your product is going to be technical audience. Surely sometimes it can be, and should be actually, but really who you're appealing to is the people who are writing the checks. And the people who are writing the check is not the VP of engineering, okay? The guy writing the check is a financial guy. So you have to speak in the financial person's language in order to be convincing about this. Okay, so it's a business stakeholder you're really focused on, and you have to speak in their language. So in our case, we're going to talk a little about cash flow. Okay, cash flow is the language of finance guys at companies. They worry about this every day. Financial metrics of the company, and the most effective QVP uses common financial metrics that he or she, as a CFO or as a finance person, is used to using. By the way, interrupt me at any time with questions. I love questions, so you don't have to wait until the end. Do it when it's right in your head. So one other thing I want to point out here is an interesting thing. One of the most important people at the customer, I'll give you these little clues from my experience throughout our conversation today. We think, oh, I'm going to talk to the CEO. She's and he's the most important person. One of the most important persons at the company that you're going to present your product is the administrator, the admin, the girl or the boy who arranges the time of other important people at the companies, right? And you can't irritate those people, and you have to support those people. There's been times where they call you up and say, sorry, the CEO is busy, we'll set it up at a later time, and you get irritated, and you think it's okay to be irritated to just a little administrator. It's very bad, because if you want another meeting quickly, he or she is going to get it for you. So it's the administrator. Never forget that when you go and approach a customer. Don't think the admin is just this little person over there, moving coffee around, right? It's very important. The administrator is your key, and you have to make a relationship. I don't care how fancy a guy you are, you have to make a relationship with that administrator to really get successful and get into the company. Everybody complains, oh, there's so many layers of steps and layers of talking to different people in order to sell a product. Right, remember one thing, the administrator is going to help you navigate that. Okay, so be nice to the administrator. Bring donuts. Okay, right. Anyway, so there are 3 activities in creating a QVP. There's a discovery activity, there's a measure activity, there's a calculate activity. Discover, where you discover your customer needs. I'm going to talk a little about that more, and then in a few slides we're going to talk about each of these things. You have to measure areas, measure areas where you bring improvements and impact your customer's business, again I'll say, and then you do make a calculation using terms and using a model that the financial people can understand. Okay, something about discovery. Discovery is very important. As you are sitting in a discussion with the sales guy, as a product manager, you'll sit with the sales guy, they're evaluating whether or not to sell to companies, whether this is a good effort, whether we should spend our time trying to sell to this company, whether there's a fit, etc. This is all part of this discovery process. And when somebody says, the CEO or whoever says, let's go for this customer. Product management has to understand everything about that customer before you even step foot anywhere with a customer. You have to understand what their needs are. Right now, this company is enjoying some success, has some challenges, is focused on doing this, maybe has a new product line, or whatever it is, okay? You have to understand that. And I'd like to say, just for dramatic purposes, I'd like to say you have to understand it better than they understand it, or at least as equally as well as they understand it. So it's really important during the discovery process. I make the assumption that you know, as a product manager, you know your product, okay? So don't focus on your product. Focus on understanding the customer before you set foot inside the customer. Who is the customer? What do they need? What are their problems? We'll talk a little more about that. But it's really important to say your job is to fit your stuff into their problem, okay? And we say that, and it's very vague. Oh yeah, understanding the customer's pain. It's not specific enough. You have to, we'll talk about that right now. Okay? So we're going to go through these 3 steps, these 3 activities. First, discovery. Okay, you need to be figuring out some things. I put a whole bunch of things. The presentation will be available. Ibrahim will make the presentation available to everybody. So there are a lot of words here, which I don't particularly like to put on a slide, but anyway. So you need to ask yourself the question, is the customer challenged with costs? Most customers are challenged with their costs. Okay, they're trying to reduce their costs and they're trying to increase their revenue. Depending on the level of maturity of the company, they're either just spending and now what they're focused on is getting revenue, or in a more mature company is saying, okay, we're getting revenue, we're going to get more revenue, but now we have to, we sort of went overboard on the cost, and we need to. So you need to understand these things. In that first meeting, I said, one of the things you're going to talk about during the discovery meeting is just try to understand whether the customer has a cost problem. Okay? And what kind of cost? Is it operational expenditures? Is it capital expenditures? Is it buying physical things? Is it paying for labor in operational expenditures? What kind of cost is it? Okay? Labor costs are a significant part. One of the things that you can focus on is actually in cost reduction, reducing labor costs, okay, or shifting labor costs from one place to another. People don't like to hear reducing labor costs because that means people are gone from the company. But in fact, we're having a business discussion here, and that's important. I don't know what's going on about this flickering stuff, but it's okay. It's just a test. Actually, there's a subliminal message. Let's see if I can. We're back. 30 hertz. So maybe that's a problem. Anyway, so you have to understand your customer clearly. If your product is improving system, what I call generally system costs, to make them more efficient using a similar configuration, you need to understand the cost that they have to make to upgrade. Maybe there's a problem with the connector. No problem with the connector. I don't know what's happening here. Yeah, I think it is. All right, so here. I have actually a funny story that I'll tell later. You have to stand on one foot and hold this. Anyway, so if you're improving system costs, you have to understand the details. You have to understand how much it's going to cost them to upgrade. If they wanted to upgrade their IT configuration, their AWS infrastructure configuration, et cetera, you need to understand that. And you need to understand how your product is going to help impact that. So if they're interested, if they're at a point where they're trying to generate new revenue or more revenue, which of course all companies are, but then you have to understand what the areas of the improvements are in money terms, okay? And if your customer is wanting to retain customers, then there's sort of a quality issue, and you have to understand the future potential for. You have to put in the model. Maybe I may give you 20 more customers next month by doing this, right? So that's how you quantify it. And one customer, is worth this much, so therefore,
comes before the other. Meaning, like when I discover the need of the client, maybe they want or their focus on is increasing the revenue
Yes.
and not cutting the cost.
Yes.
But I know my product can cut costs more efficiently and help them more efficiently than increasing the revenue. So do I try to shift their focus on costs rather than...
It's a dangerous thing to shift focus of a stated goal of a customer.
Exactly.
You shouldn't be doing that. But as you describe your solution, you can say, my core effort is to address your core issues, your priority issues. And oh, by the way, if you use our product, you can get these other things. To answer your question directly about QVP, sure, include it in the QVP. But focus on the things that you think, what their pain is. I hate to use that word because it's so vague. What their problems are, what their challenges are, specific in quantified terms, what they are. Focus on those things first and say, oh, by the way, in addition to that, we do this stuff. Include that in the model. I'll show you later about this stuff. So discovery is really important.
I have a quick question.
Sure, sure.
Are we quantifying the value proposition differently for the specific needs of each customer? So every time it will be different?
This is good. He's a mind reader. So we're okay?
Repeat the question.
Okay, repeat the question. Repeat the question.
So I'm asking, are we quantifying the value proposition differently for each customer?
Yes, in general terms. There should be, okay, so the question is whether we should have different QVPs for different customers. Answer yes. Further answer is you should have a library of all of your customers and you should have their QVP in that library. There's another reason for this later that I'll talk about. So it's targeted. It needs to be targeted. It's targeted like this is the only customer in the world. Okay, my product is fitting into this customer's needs and they're the only customer in the world. Surely the techniques you use, the discovery process, the questions that you ask, there's lots of commonality because you're coming from a common, functionality base with your product, right? Surely there's overlap. The methods, the techniques, the formatting, the structure, we'll see, I have an example later, same. But the details and the contents, every model is different.
What I've always thought that the value proposition is about the product, so it's fixed.
Yeah.
It's not customizable.
No. Value proposition is about the customer. You give me the opportunity to repeat that. The value proposition is about the customer, and the value proposition is about what you are delivering to the customer's business. And you're quantifying it. JOD. How many JODs? Literally. I mean, I'll show you examples. When we went to Mr. Fawaz, we had how many JODs? And we had a cash flow analysis of the JOD improvements. And then we said the internal rate of return, IRR, is going to be this because of that, right? And then the CFO got involved and said, no. The IRR went down when he made the numbers more realistic, but it's okay. As long as one thing is true, okay? That the value, just one punchline issue here. The value that you return to the customer, okay, is bigger than how much money they pay you for your solution. Okay, right? Got to be. If they're equal or the number's negative, it's bad, okay? It's very bad, okay? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, regarding the product, I tend to agree with him. You should have a unique product, but maybe you need a fine-tuning for the customer.
Yeah.
But your product remain a product.
I am not trying to suggest the big black hole problem, which I think maybe we're on the edge of. I chose not to address this issue, but now you bring it up directly, I will address the issue. You're not looking for ways to change your product, although the product manager will go back to the company and say, look, I heard this and we haven't got that. So maybe we ought to be doing something about getting that, right? But primarily, what you're doing is you're understanding their needs. You're trying to take what you have now to sell and plug it into their needs. And then talk about maybe future enhancements or something more in line with what we were talking about before, how you add the additional features, et cetera, functionality in order to get one of these other areas that you don't have covered. But primarily, I think the basic truth here is that quantified value proposition has to be tailored to each of the customers. When you have this in your mind, you are discovering what is that customer all about. Okay? What is this customer? What do they need specifically? Not that one, this one.
And you're not afraid to lose your identity.
No, absolutely not, because it's a way of expressing identity. It's a way of expressing your
But
identity.
keep changing.
No, it's not changing because you're not going to. There's a lot of commonality. It's not. We're not saying we do this and oh, no, I'm sorry, we do this. We're not saying that. We're talking about the value that we bring to a particular customer, and the customer has certain needs.
Exactly.
For example, think about a list of features, whatever. I hate to refer to features, but these customers are going to take 2 of those and not 3 other ones because they're not interested in that. So a pricing list should accommodate. God invented subscription models in order to allow you to express, I have these, and then I have these, and then I have these features. You have 3 different customers on the 3 different tiers, right? Really, they're using this, they're paying for that. And they're thinking, oh, maybe I should use this and pay a little more, or use that and pay much more, whatever, right? So it's not a question. It's not like you are watering down your product in any way, or it's very specific. What do they need? What do I got to make them need? Make the customer feel like they're the only customer in the world. Obviously, you can't make a successful business if you change your product with every customer. I'm not suggesting that, right?
But also we can do, let's say, one product and different pricing mechanism can fit all customers.
Sure, many different things, but this is not directly online with QVP. I want to point out that it's important, and I will talk more later about the importance of having a systematic process in your company about QVP. You need to train all the people to do this stuff we're talking about. You need to, right? You need to get it in on the ground and really make it happen. So that's okay, and you have a product, okay? You have a product. You're not making that any different. You're just making how you show the product and how you emphasize the value of that product.
Sugar.
Specifically, not sugar. I mean, whatever. But you're having a conversation about how your product fits in with their needs. That's it. I'm sorry. You had another anyway? Okay, good. So we measure, we discover, we measure. So we want to find things that demonstrate the financial condition. Very hard to get this information sometimes. I quite understand that. Okay, that's why and we can certainly have another session at some time. You really have to elicit. You have to pull out from people. People don't want to say, "Oh, we had negative revenue last month," right? They don't want to say that about their company, or our revenue isn't growing as fast as it used to grow. They don't like to say these things. These are valuable piece of information for you to know, especially how that revenue, the reasons for which that revenue is going down. The curve is not like sharp curve up. It's sort of flattened out. Whatever. Understanding these reasons are really important, having good conversation with a customer about that. In some cases, when you're selling in America to public companies, for example, you can go to their mandatory financial announcements. They have to file forms. And you can go there, and even though these 10Q form is a very complicated thing, you can go dig in and understand where they're spending the money. They have 3 divisions. They're spending all their money spending a lot more money in this division than in those. You can understand these things with public financial information. Unfortunately, most of the time, even in America, and certainly in this region, people are not comfortable in discussing this issue, but you have to try to get your hands around it somehow, because this is a cash analysis. It's cash. It's got to be reduced to dollars. That's the whole purpose of this QVP. It's not a qualitative thing saying, I have cool AI, I have cool stuff, right? You're not saying that. You're saying, I'm impacting your business. Okay? So an important thing, and we'll get into a very detailed example later, but making a trial of your solution, if you have the opportunity to make a trial, is to show them in their environment, if possible, say you're optimizing AWS configuration or something. Maybe you work with the guys there and you put your tool in for a day and then it does things and you can show those things that it does. Very valuable to have that point of, to have that proof of concept, the so-called POC experience. Very valuable. Frequently you don't have that. So sometimes you really need to have from your library of QVP a company that's similar to them. You don't want to talk too much about who that is, but you could tell the customer, we have a similar customer in your space to which we have done this, and then start your analysis on that basis. But you ought to have some reference point. It should be empirical. That's the point. It should be empirical, all right, to some degree. Okay? And you'll get all of this. So you want to make sure that the trial is, and I have an example for my personal experience in Turkey, about getting data, collecting data from this POC that helps you quantify. All right, calculation, all these fancy terms. These, when I said that you have to appeal to the language, you have to speak the language of the finance people. This is a quantified value proposition. I say it again, okay? Cash value, then you have to speak the language. You have to talk about in terms of net present value. Go to Investopedia, and they'll give you beautiful. Investopedia is a great resource, gives you great, detailed explanation, formulas for these things. But you need net present value. You need internal rate of return. In fact, I do a lot of work with helping companies to improve their business model in my company, improving business model, improving product strategy process, and getting investors. You don't want to talk to an investor in the world, anyone, a private guy, an angel person, an institutional investor especially, where you don't understand IRR, internal rate of return. Yeah.
Are you supposed to get these numbers from the sales team or the partnership team to help us kind of?
Product management is the core of I'll answer that question. Product management is the core of a product company. You have to have relations with all the people, the sales guys, and influence them with the...
If it's product-based, not project-based.
I understand. Yeah, like with project-based too. Same thing.
But at the same time, that's why I mentioned sales and partnership, because they're probably the biggest two funnels of revenue that drives
Understood.
certain things.
By the way, even for project companies, like, outsourcing companies or people that develop software, you need to be making QVPs as well.
Because with a lot of SaaS, it goes back to who the sales are talking to and what kind of partnership that's aligned with that, and somehow it just
Of course, you have to coordinate with the sales guys, and you have to understand, and your financial guy has to be involved as well, right? The finance guy has to be involved, right? Too. True. Your finance guy, the company who's selling the products, finance guy has to be involved in some level of the decisions, right? Too.
So basically, you're telling me it's not a one-man show. It's more of a leader kind of people.
It's a multi-person theater, multi-person theater. But all I'm saying is here, I encourage you to understand these things because they're very misunderstood. For example, people talk about ROI in strange ways. Somebody was saying ROI, and I said, no, dear, it's a ratio. Okay, it's a ratio, it's a percentage. Anyway, so you have to understand these things. In the example that I give that I'll talk about soon, you need to understand these things and talk about these things because the finance guy is looking at these things. What's my payback period? I'm getting this over what period of time? Am I paid back for this, giving these guys this money? Okay. What's the total cost of ownership? It's not just a product parachutes down into the company and then it's being used and everybody's happy. You have to train somebody inside to use your product. So the total cost of ownership, that's called TCO. I don't like the word ownership, but the total cost of taking your product and putting it into my company means I have to spend more money than just fees that I pay you. I have to train people. I have to do whatever. I have to do many other things. So total cost of ownership is important. Return on investment, as I said, this quantity here has to be positive. The gains that I bring have to be bigger than the cost, namely how much money they're spending on your solution, right? All right, so calculate. Benjamin Franklin, have to say Benjamin Franklin. I think, I don't know how many know Benjamin Franklin, but he was really a super extraordinary person. He was a scientist. He discovered some important aspects in 1750s, 1750. He discovered some important things before Michael Faraday, before those guys did more physics details on what electromagnetism was. He did electricity. He was a scientist. He was an inventor. He invented a new heating thing, an oven for a house. He created free public library in America, the whole free public library system. He was a politician. He was a writer of the Declaration of Independence. He went to France to get money to support the colonial guys, the Americans, to fight against the British because the French hated the British. Anyway, still do. Right? So weapons and money came from France. Benjamin Franklin went and arranged that with the king to get money. And the French were happy to help kick out the British, right? Okay, anyway, and he said a great thing. The greatest part of the misery in mankind are brought about by false estimates they have of the value of things. Perfect. A perfect, nice statement. Great guy. Anyway, so how do you use, I have a lot of details. We can talk after, we can talk some other time. I'll leave my telephone number. You can buzz me and however you want to do it. But there is a engagement that people call, customer success people and an engagement process and all these fancy words, right? So QVP needs to be an essential part. The quantified value proposition has to be an essential part of your process, of your selling process, of your product processes, whatever. Has to be important. And here is the kicker, here. You ought to talk about value before you have conversation with a customer about price. People jump to price. Some customers, in fact, this is very important, when customers hit you on the head about price too early, you know this is probably not a good prospect because they haven't given you the opportunity to talk about the value you're bringing for that price. You should avoid talking about price. In the QVP, there's price. Okay, I have to estimate price because I have to compare it against the benefits that I give. So certainly there's a discussion of price, but you can't ever get into a negotiation about price before you have the opportunity to talk about value. It's death. And if you get yourself in front of a customer who's focused on price, you need to begin to be a little worried about it, right? It doesn't sound good. It looks like they're shopping for the cheapest thing, right? And that's not good, generally. It's not good for them, by the way. Yeah, not good for them. So demonstrate the value using QVP before you begin to talk about price. I know this is an ideal world, and I said, let me repeat, in the QVP, there is your price. You have to reference the benefits against your price. But negotiating price, don't do it too early. And you have to make systematic in your company, maybe you ought to write down somewhere in your company, ways to go about gathering data, how you gather data, how you ask these questions, how you talk to people about things that they're not, talk to customers about things they're not particularly comfortable talking about, like how much cost or too much cost or revenue slope, right? Not being in the right way, okay? And my objective, my mission is to help make QVP to be a critical business process. It should be a critical business process. Okay. All right, here we go. So, I was VP of Product Engineering in a company doing mobile network optimization in Istanbul. Okay, we were one of the first guys to put machine learning into the mobile network to reduce. It's a long story. I'll tell you about the story later, but we're one of the first people to apply machine learning to optimizing performance of the mobile network. Okay, we had an opportunity with the biggest and maybe one of the best mobile operators in the world is Turkcell. I don't know if you've heard of Turkcell. Good company in all kinds of respects, from top to bottom. And we had this product that we had created to, how would you say, to balance the load between the towers. When you go out of here, you're going to be preferentially connected to a particular tower, but there's another tower over there. And this tower, since this is a popular flow area, this tower is overused. That tower is less used. But the problem is really difficult, even for the smart network engineers, to figure out how to share the load so that when you walk out of this building, you're connected over there, not over there. So what network operators do is they say, oh, we have a capacity problem here. They buy more stuff. They put more computers in that one, not worrying about the problem that there's another underutilized asset sitting over there. They put more capital expenses into that one because they have to increase the capacity because there's a big traffic flow. So one of the first guys who invented this load balancing algorithm with machine learning. So we got a proof of concept. We managed with difficulty because they're very particular about people touching their network. During Ramadan, one time in Istanbul, at a base station, not in the core of the city, outside of the city, on the Asian side, a couple of base stations, and we ran our stuff, okay? And we demonstrated significant improvements to balancing the load across these things. Really great improvements. We were going for the final report of this POC. My guys in the smart network engineering guys, they created a 50-page presentation. 50 pages, how smart we are. We understood this parameter, we changed that parameter, this improved over here, look at this base station, all this stuff, right? And I said, we're not going to say that. Well, you can go rub elbows with the technical guys at the customer. Cool, we'll put that in, as an appendix to the presentation. But the presentation is going to have 2 slides, not 50, 2. One of them is going to say something about the POC, where we were, in here or there, Kadikari, and with this thing and that switch, with that manufacturer, whatever. And the second slide is this. Actually, the first slide was really this, and the second slide was this. Okay? We presented this to a team of, a senior finance guy, to the network manager, okay? And I had been in meetings with the finance guy before. By the time the third slide came along, he was, falling asleep, right? Okay, right. We put up this slide, and he was like, cool, okay, I got that. No, really? How did you do that? Right? He was wide awake, and he understood that our benefits were going to be, over time, millions of dollars over time. If we took what we did in Kadikari and we spread it across the whole Turkcell network, that we'd extrapolate the benefits and we would bring this value in. The guy said, this is totally cool. Okay? And the categories that we looked at was business value over 5 years, IRR, internal rate of return, which is good, really good. Total cost of ownership, how much they'd have to spend in order to get our stuff integrated with them, complete cost of ownership, and CapEx deferral. So the big category was they wouldn't have to buy that equipment anymore to fill in there. They could just use what they already bought over there to carry the similar load with similar response times, with similar stuff, and they wouldn't have to spend that kind of money. This is not insignificant. This is $31 million. Okay?
This is double the benefit.
I'm sorry?
This is double the benefit.
This is absolutely. It's beautiful. So more than double, because we're asking for a license fee, I think that amounted to $3 million a year, okay? So the good news here is that not only did we win deployment of this product in the Turkcell network, which is a really good thing to do, it's hard to do. Not only that, but they came back to us and they said, you guys are really clever, we like you. We want you to manage our network on KPIs. Okay? There was more complexity to that because they had to overstaff and they wanted to move. The labor laws, like here, are very complex there. So they wanted to move some of their team into another entity that we would manage. This turned into $100 million, hundreds of millions of dollars. So instead of saying, I buy your solution and then manage the KPIs, call drops, number of call drops, and whatever, bandwidth changes and other sort of stuff. Instead of that, we would manage that, and we get paid based on KPIs. So it's a really good story, and it's a true story. So Quantified, one page, this page here, and to my knowledge, the relationship between Turkcell and the company that I work for there is still going on. So I can't even begin to understand how much money that meant. But at that time, we're expecting over 5 years or so to make $100 million. So this made $100 million. This made $100 million. QVP, one page. Not 1.5 page, not 2 pages, 1 page only, with all the critical information. Like, are you familiar with Mark Twain? You ever heard of Mark Twain? American author, funny man. He once put a full page, a half-page ad in the New York Times that said, news of my death is greatly exaggerated. He's a funny guy. Tom Sawyer. All kids should read Tom Sawyer. Anyway, he once said, before emails, way before emails, this was like 1890s or something like that, he once said, I am sorry my letter to you is so long, I didn't have enough time to make it shorter. Remember that story, right? It's harder to make something shorter than it is to make it long, right? I made it long, sorry, it's so long, I could have made it shorter, but I didn't have any time. 1 page, that's it. 1 page, this page. This page says something about costs and benefits. This says something about CapEx reduction and deferral. I'm providing that feature with this load balancing machine learning stuff. I'm reducing third-party fees that you would otherwise have to pay. I'm improving revenues because there is more better capacity and drop calls go down and all kinds of other stuff, good consequences of it. Okay, and then we talk about cumulative cost, and here is what we're talking about. Here's my prices. Okay, I say how much I'm going to price and whatever. So I compare what my prices are against what value that I bring to them. Anyway, that is a good example. I'll send this around if you want to go into the deeper details of this. These are the categories you really want to talk about for the finance guy, MPV, IRR in particular, internal rate of return. Yes, sir.
I don't know, but I feel what you were talking about makes sense a lot when it's like an enterprise thing, right? Or it's a big project. But I'm thinking...
I didn't set this question up, honestly. It's all on his own.
But I'm thinking like more like SaaS, like SMB, like stuff.
Okay. I have another slide. I don't remember where it is. Ibrahim, I'll get there. Hold that thought. I believe, let me just say in answer to, in all fairness to you, your question, I believe that whether you're wherever the B's and the C's are in your business, B to C or C to B or whatever, B to B to C and all these things, whatever it is, you can always do a quantified value proposition. You should always, even if you're giving consumer stuff, you have to be able to evaluate. You have to begin to think about how to evaluate your product's impact on the customer, one way or the other. Yeah, yeah, it's the same process. And I'll go even farther. You'll see there's going to be a breathtaking thing, so I'll ask you before I go to that slide to breathe deeply, because there's another extension for this. QVP, here is a worksheet. You should have these things in your process. You should have a standard form of this. You should have a nice little spreadsheet, but all models are going to be different. You have a different labor costs in your company. You have different amount of people doing that stuff that I'm helping, different from him or her company, right? So it all has to be tailored. It has to make sense to them. That's the purpose of my story with the Fawaz's CFO. Okay, Mr. Fawaz's CFO, right? Is that, you know, he said, okay, it's not right. Okay, let's fix it. Okay. As long as you have the model right.
Yes.
You have to have the model right. If you don't have the model right, then you have to go back home and make the model right. Anyway, so I have one of those, you know, you have to have one of these acronyms, whatever these things. There should be a few properties of a QVP. It should be simple. Simple. You can grasp it in a glance. One page, simple. Has to be targeted to the particular customer, targeted to your features, your product does these specific things to their company, to their product, to their customers, whatever, targeted. Empirical. It's desirable to have the data that you bring to it that's actually measured data, right? Not just guessed. Sometimes you have to guess because you don't have the data, but you have to at least show that the guesses are reasonable. All right, you have to say, look, I made this assumption. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. CFO. That's not a good assumption. Help me with the assumption, okay? It's not the right thing. Oops. I don't know what's going on here. There we go. Maybe I got to touch. I have to touch it. Touching is very important. Anyway, so it has to be empirical, data-based. It has to be plausible, which means make sense. It's got to make sense. You should put the language in the language of the financial language, okay, that makes sense from a financial point of view. You have to understand your audience, and don't forget the administrator, by the way. Anyway, so it's the step process. All right? And this is the kind of kicker. I've given at HTU courses on entrepreneurship, at Showman Foundation, at various places in the neighborhood, okay? And I always wind up a conversation with this, and it freaks people out, okay? When you really think about it, it freaks you out, okay? I like to challenge, like a startup company, and say, make a QVP. Go home and make a QVP, please, okay? If they come back and they say, I can't do it, then they ought to be building another product. If they can't, the guys, the girls that are making this product can't go home and figure out how to make a QVP, they should be doing something else. Make another product. Because it's not, I don't care whether it's B2C or B2B or whatever B's and C's there are, okay? If you can't identify a source of financial benefits brought to the customer by your product, sell something else. It's a real good indicator. If you put your brain to it and say, I just can't figure it out. I can't figure out, well, how am I going to do this? Whatever. Knowing all the procedural things we've talked about, the procedures, and then going to do it and not being successful at making one, sell something else. Okay? This is the way it is, okay? Now, before I go to the next slide, I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath. This is extra credit. Okay, you ready? You take a deep breath. You know, breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. Anyway, okay, right? Ready? Okay. QVP, I'm not trying to be a religious guy here at all. QVP is really fundamental. I said it in a way, it talks about this process, that procedure, but the whole fundamentally making a quantified value proposition has much broader application than just understanding whether your product is going to be bought or making your product, helping your product to be bought by a customer. It's much more fundamental. Everybody in this room, in their job, okay, sorry for this, it's an extension, takes these thoughts that I gave before and talks about what value they bring to their company. I am performing this role in the company. I'm a product manager. I'm a sales guy. I'm a CEO. Okay, I'm whatever in this company. Everybody should have in mind making their own little private QVP. I am adding value to the company, and the best QVP to have is a QVP, which means you quantify this and say, I'm helping drive this revenue. I'm helping reduce this cost. I'm helping do these things. So this is, I know that's a human resources thing to say, sorry, but QVP really, the thinking behind it, really is important for how you are as an employee too, and how to demonstrate what your value is to the company. Sorry, I couldn't resist the extension of this. Anyway, that's a story. That's a story. Anyway, I have this company called Transformation Strategy Partners. We're advisory, strategic advisory company. We do. We're not like Ernst & Young or any of those guys. We're totally focused on product strategy. That's it. Product strategy. That's the focus. How to help companies understand how to be better, how to create QVPs, how to use what we call our product toolbox, how to use various techniques in order to get their product more systematically better over time. Okay? And by the way, everyone knows this guy, Eric Ries, right? He's the lean guy, right? I have to say something about him. I can't resist. I'm sorry. I apologize in advance. He has taken the credit for, he and this guy Osterwalder has taken credit for the business model canvas. You've heard of the business model canvas? Okay, this guy Osterwalder and this guy Eric Ries, they didn't invent it. The guy who invented it is Steve Blank. Steve Blank invented it, so remember that. They're taking all the credit. Steve is a smart guy in the background. He doesn't care. But Steve Blank is the guy that created the so-called business model canvas. And we do a bunch of things. We have training courses. We have coaching sessions. We do that. One of the things that we've come to do is to help companies on the edge of wanting, either early companies or whatever stage companies who are looking for additional funding, to go help improve their business model, improve their value proposition, get a good picture about cost, revenue and cost, the cost structure, et cetera, and then helping them go get investment. Okay, so we do that. We do that as well. And this is the website if you want to do that. I'm done. Any other questions?
I want to just say something because to my question.
Okay. All right, he's back. He's back.
And I see what you're saying, but they're doing it in a different way, but it is really the QVP, right? You would see in a SaaS company, you go to their website or homepage, they would say, how many employees do you have? How much do you pay for this software, etc.?
They'll have a questionnaire.
And they will try to get you, this is how much you will save if you come
Yeah.
with us, this is how. So everyone is trying to do QVP in their own way.
Sure, but the difference is